Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Howdy, Bernice. Can you hear me? Awesome. Looks like we've got about 2 minutes before we are to begin. Yeah, it's my pleasure. It is nice to meet you as well. Where are you in from, Bernice? Savannah, Georgia. I was just there the week before last for 4th of July. Yeah, it was hot. Had some good food. The weather held up. It was a nice fireworks show right there on the river. Had a good time. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, originally. I am serving here in Birmingham, Alabama for the last couple of decades. Yeah. All right, then. We've got about 60 seconds before I'm set to go live. LaKesha, if you are listening or tuned in, can you give me a thumbs up if it's okay for me to proceed? Okay. All right. We are here this evening to talk a bit about a book that I wrote several years ago entitled Minding Your Thoughts. And well, I guess I'll start out by telling y'all a little bit about myself. My name is Adam Mixon. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, via Cincinnati, Ohio. I've been in Alabama for the last 20 some years. And during that time, I've been pastoring and serving a church and also doing work as an engineer. And most of the books that I have written over these last several years have all extended out of the pastoral ministry, my service, the Zion Spring Church here in Birmingham, Alabama. This particular series on minding your thoughts, this nice little book here, is really intended to be used as a guide um, a Bible study, if you will. You could use it in a small book study, but it's primarily aimed at equipping the reader with the tools that will allow for us to kind of reclaim our agency, reclaim the control of our inner life, our thought life, so that we can deal more effectively, uh, more and respond more constructively and creatively with circumstances that we find are often beyond our control. Minding your thoughts, the fancy word for minding your thoughts is metacognition. But if I say that word, nobody is going to know what I'm talking about. But metacognition means beyond thinking, or thinking about what you are thinking. Hence, again, the title of this study on metacognition. And with that being said, at the core of the book, without telling you the entire, giving it all away, or spoiling it for you, it aims at undoing negative self-talk. And in the book, we call this negative self-talk, we call it ANTS, the acronym ANTS, ANTS, which is an acronym again for automatic negative thoughts, and how these tend to invade, uh, for some of us, even the most pristine moments of our lives. And these ANTS, this negative self-talk, is rooted in trauma, and that trauma can be from some type of abuse, or uh, it can come from racism or sexism or misogyny or any other ism. It can come from some rumor of our inferiority. Oftentimes, it comes from dysfunctional family systems, and because we're not taught to filter these things, the conversations that we hear, the words that we hear, the things that are said to us, what we're exposed to has an impact on the words that we say to ourselves, or the narratives that we frame about ourselves. So almost without us really knowing it, unless we're taught to think about and unpack what it is that we're thinking about, we can become complicit in perpetuating our trauma by rehearsing and repeating narratives. And all of us have narratives that have shaped us, but but while they shaped us, these narratives in no way absolutely define us. So then, Mind Your Thoughts is an exercise in learning how to think about what we are thinking about in the framework of our faith. How to think about what we think about, to think about the narratives, again, the words that we rehearse and repeat to ourselves, and then lay these narratives next to the grand narrative or the meta narrative of Scripture, and through the lens of spirit, so that we can begin to discern the veracity of our thoughts and the words that we say to ourselves, or perhaps the lack of that veracity. So Mind Your Thoughts is an exercise in learning how to name our feelings, to think about what's beyond our feelings, to develop a broad emotional vocabulary. Some would call that emotional fluency, so that we can begin to reclaim and control our thoughts, feelings, and harness our sentimentality in ways that foster health, wholeness, and healing. That's what Mind Your Thoughts is about in a nutshell. Now, it is framed in my deliberate and unapologetic understanding of the gospel and the Christian scriptures. But in some ways, I feel like the exercises that one might gather from even just reading through this short little book can be beneficial in helping one to again, just learn how to think about what we're thinking about, and thinking about how what we think about becomes an internal conversation, and how that internal conversation in turn informs our actions, and our attitudes and our outlooks, and the way that we encounter the world around us and respond to our circumstances. Um, it's really about, at the very core of our being, learning how to reclaim agency. Now, I'm not one of these happy thinking, positive thinking folks, but I do believe that our thought life and what we speak has a way of framing our reality. So this is not a book about positive thinking, but it is a book about learning how to think about how we're thinking. And again, think about how we string these words together in narratives that in some ways undermine the grand narrative, God's purpose, his plans for our lives, reclaiming our agency and our control. Now, for sure, again, because many of us have encountered trauma from all the things I talked about earlier, there are certain things that get dropped on us, or certain circumstances that we're dropped into, that are not about anything that we've said or done. It's kind of the accident of our birth, the mystery of the human condition, the suffering that scripture says that we will all have to endure. But with that being said, despite our lack of control over our circumstances, sometimes we don't control everything that life serves us, or all that we get in this life, the families that we were born into, all of those types of things. We don't control all of that. But at a certain point, we all are responsible for how, or how we respond to these circumstances. And I think, again, it's just a very powerful tool, a means of us reclaiming our agency and getting our power back, and learning how to respond to harsh circumstances in a way that can be constructive and lend toward our health and our wholeness. Now, with that being said, um, I would like to let you all know, in absolute transparency, that much of what I worked through in this book as a result of me coming to faith as an adult and being born under circumstances that are way less than ideal. I was born into abuse. I was born into addiction. I was born into neglect. And as a young person, had given myself to destructive habits. And then I heard the gospel, and it radically reoriented my life. But I learned really quickly that it wasn't a one time, one moment kind of encounter. It was a discipline. And primarily, it was a disciplining of my mind, learning how to think differently, and think differently about how I'm thinking. That has allowed me not to end up a statistic in somebody's book. So, my personal story in some way has compelled me, and makes me want to tell others that uh, yes, life's not fair, and we're often confronted with things that are painful, and we learn to see ourselves in a negative light and rehearse negative things to ourselves. But there's a way forward. There's a way through. There's a way to regain control of your mind. Um, uh, and respond to circumstances in a way that's constructive and creative. I do see a question here. It says, "You say you believe in God now. Do you ever have positive thoughts?" Of course I do. Of course I do. Um, I have I call them constructive thoughts. Again, not in the way that philosophy speaks of optimism, but a way that's deeply rooted in the gospel, and rooted in The character of a God who renews and restores, the character of a God who is able to um, work things together for good, even if they are not all good. So I guess if we want to parse or, argue semantics, I guess you can call that a positive thought. Well, I call it constructive. I call it hopeful. But I don't want it to get confused with, some of the positive thinking mantras that are out here now. Um, but yeah, that's an interesting question, Lucille. Does that answer your question? Okay. If anybody else has any questions, I guess at this point I will share with you all just um, some of the methodology that you would take away after having walked through this book. The back half of the book has several little illustrations. I told you all that one of the things that we explore in this book is automatic negative thoughts. And these negative thoughts, sometimes it's dispositional, it's about our personality, but oftentimes it's rooted in some trauma, some way of thinking that developed in reaction to some trauma. And we have these what we call ants, right? And the back half of the book is a really kind of little practical exercise. Some might even say it's kind of childish, but I think it's really constructive. And what I go through is I name out just a series of the things that many of us are guilty of saying to ourselves. Things like, I can't believe I just did that, or I'm going to lose my mind, or this is killing me, or my mother and father were right, or I'm so stupid, or I don't fit in anywhere. All of those types of things that we may at some point in time have said to ourselves, or maybe saying to ourselves now, those are the ants. Those are the automatic negative thoughts. Those are those defaults that are unhealthy. But I believe that when we come into a loving relationship with the Creator, and when we give ourselves to the discipline of study and meditation, um, we can learn the antidote to our ants. Yes, Lucille, I have had counseling, both pastoral counseling and professional counseling. Yeah, and I have the great gift of having married a mental health counselor. So again, much of what I've written in this book is an overlap between what I've learned in my theological education as a pastor, but also what I've learned from having walked through this and submitted to counseling, and again, having married a mental health counselor. I don't believe that there is or should be a disconnect between what we offer in pastoral ministry as far as pastoral counseling. I don't think there are certain things that I can't speak to. There are limits to my training, where I will often refer people to counseling. And of course, I will walk with them through that, as has been done with me. Um, but I think the two go together. And unfortunately, in underserved communities, particularly the African American community, we don't give enough time or space to talking about mental health and how to think about what we're thinking about. We don't even use that language. We don't have the emotional fluency. We don't have the emotional vocabulary to even begin to learn how to talk about or name our feelings in a way that would allow us to begin to choose how we respond to those feelings, or how we can aim at learning how to control those feelings. So yes, that's what this book is about. It's broken down. Some of the language I'm using here is language that I would not use in a small group words like metacognition and meta-narrative, all that. I wouldn't use that language. And that language is not language that you would find in a book. It's really more, it's closer in than that, and it's a bit more practical so that lay people or individuals who are in study groups can access it, or somebody can pick it up and just read it as a devotion or a guided personal study. That's how this book is formatted. And that's how I've commended it, I guess, to the congregation I serve. And then to, I commend this book to you. You can find all of my guided studies at adammixon.com. My brand is just Adam. And yeah, if you have any additional questions or any other thoughts that you would like to share, I'm certainly up for them. But I also believe that if you've heard everything you need to hear, then I'm not going to prolong the time with idle words. So, yeah, thank you all. I do know that you could likely be in any place, especially on a Thursday evening or what I call Friday Eve. So thank you for stopping by here. I hope you grab a copy of the book, and I hope it blesses you and encourages you. And if you want to reach out and we can talk some more about this offline, I would absolutely welcome that. So with that, LaKesha, um, uh, what next? Is it okay to go ahead and yeah, thank you, LaKesha, for inviting me to be a part again. And yeah, conference has been great. The lineup has been amazing. I've been to a lot of church conferences, a lot of conventions, been immersed in a lot of denominational work. And this, even in the virtual environment, is by far one of the best that I've been a part of for 2 years running. So thank you, LaKesha, for your hard work. And yeah, I'm going to turn y'all loose. Have a good evening, and thank you.